Hey, 8th graders, Mr. Catlin here with your help for your algebra cool down. This is lesson 7, and we have this graph that's representing the revenue in dollars that a company expects if they sell their product for P dollars. So, based on the model, which price would generate more revenue for the company, 5 or 17? So, $5 would be right here, and that would, based on the graph, produce about this much money. And $17 would be right here, and the graph estimates that it would produce that much money. So, which of these is greater? So, the one that's higher up on the y-axis is greater, and that would be the one when x is 5. So, we're going to say $5, and we're going to say that when x equals 5, the revenue
Sam, Spain, your ride is here. Sam, Spain, your ride is here.
when x is 5, the revenue is greater than when x equals 17. Right? So it's bigger. This one looks to be about like 3,700. This one's only like 2,500. Let's look at number 2. At what price should the company sell their product if they wish to make as much revenue as possible? So the most money they could make would be right here at the vertex. And we're going to use that word in our response. So this would be making $5,000 in revenue, and we would have to price our product at $10 a piece. So at what price when x equals 10, the revenue will be at the vertex of the graph, which is the max amount of revenue. Something along those lines, right? This is the most that we could make because that is the peak of our quadratic parabola. And then lastly, what is an appropriate domain for the function? And explain how you know. Well, an appropriate domain for this function, we're pricing in dollars, right? And so this is money. And with money, we can range anything as long as it's up to 2 decimals, right? So we could, looks like we can range prices anywhere from $0 to $20. So let's show that. So x needs to range anywhere or stay under or equal $20 here. And then we want to be greater, or I guess really just greater than 0, because if we were 0, we're not going to make any revenue. I guess if we're 20, we're not making any either. We'll include it. It's part of the domain. We can plug it in and not make any money. We don't want to have negative revenue. We don't want to owe money. That wouldn't make sense to this type of situation. Plus, we can't charge negative prices for our product. So there's a couple of reasons. So we can say, no negative product prices. And then this one right here, we don't want to have any negative revenue. No negative revenue amounts. We keep it under 20. Because if this was continuing to go on like it will for quadratic, this is going to dive down into the negatives, and we don't care anything about that. And I would also add to this, staying within this range of 0 to 20, but I would also say that round to nearest hundredth, or, limit this to only 2 decimal points, because that's, with money, you can't go past the second decimal point. So round to the nearest hundredth for all your x's. So x is rounded to nearest hundredth. We don't want x's that are 14.175 because you can't give that dollar amount to a cut and charge a customer that, right? But you could charge them 14.75 or 11.99, right? So, but we're just going to round these x values to the nearest hundredth. Those are kind of our stipulations for our domain that makes sense in this particular situation. And those of you that missed, we talked about a couple of different things that were mentioned on here. Okay, one of the big things is the vertex, which is the top point of the hill or the bottom part of the valley, whichever part you're talking about. It's going to either be a maximum or a minimum depending on the problem. And then we also talked about these things right here that I'm going to highlight in red. And these are called zeros of the function. And those a lot of times have specific meanings to the situation. In our situation here, this is the price that you would charge if you didn't want to make any revenue, right? And so it makes sense that it's zeros of the function. These are when your outputs are 0. And that makes sense. So output is y. Y output are 0 when you have zeros with a function. X's aren't 0 necessarily. Sometimes they are. And then the vertex is the top point. You get your zeros of the function. And the other thing that we talked about was domain, which I think I covered down here. These are the inputs of the function that are appropriate for your particular problem. We don't care about negative pricing, and we don't want to go above 20 because then we'd have negative revenue. That doesn't make sense. So we cut off the domain just to cover this window of the function, and we don't care about these extra lines that are extending down here at the bottom. Those are irrelevant to us and what we're talking about. We just want the little arch here in the middle. And that's all I got. Hopefully this will get you caught up and we'll continue to move forward. If you got more questions, feel free to email or ask in class. Later.